Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Peoplecast. I'm your host, Mike Cole, and with me today, as always, is our co-host and producer extraordinaire, Jerrin Padre.
Hello.
So, Jerrin, today is a super special day, right?
Yes, it is. You're a little soft.
Oh, well,
I think we gotta boost you up a little bit.
Yeah, let's try that. How about that? Is that better?
Maybe a little bit more.
How about that?
It's a little bit better.
Try that again. Okay.
A smidgen. Yeah.
A smidgen.
Smidgen
right.
more.
Smidgen more. There we go. There's a smidgen more.
Oh, amazing.
That is ultra loud in my ears, but that's fine. I'm good. We will manage with what we have. So as we said, today's a pretty special day. I mean, not only is this the Peoplecast season 1 finale, but we're recording our first live stream episode. How about that? Standing O. Applause. Yeah. How about that?
It's pretty incredible.
I think so.
How are you feeling, Mike?
Ooh. It's been a week. It's been a long week. And what is it? It's only Tuesday. I keep saying it's been a long week, but I've been just kind of taking the days off on my calendar for this because I am really, really excited. So how are you feeling today, Jerrin?
I'm feeling a little bit nervous, but super excited. Yeah, just a little bit nervous, but we're in pretty good company. So.
Oh, definitely. We are in super good company. We have three returning guests from this past season. Now, I did prepare just a little bit of a special intro for them. And
play it.
Yeah, we'll roll that now.
Do it. Play it. Roll it.
Peoplecast.
That's fun.
Heather Shelton. And Haley Moss. Josh Rich. With Jerrin Padre. Y'all.
I could just roll that all day.
All day. That's the whole episode.
All day. Yep, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
See, Josh and I are in the same camp, right? I'm just doing the head bob. I'm just doing this. Yeah. So
y'all gotta get a little bit more swag.
Y'all
gotta get a little bit more swag. I want to see some more shoulder.
Yeah.
That'll happen someday, Heather. Not on this episode.
Right.
It's all in the shoulder. It's so good to see all of your faces.
Yeah.
Good to see you too.
Well, why don't we go around the virtual room and do a little bit of an intro? So why don't we do name, title, and this icebreaker question. So you're stuck in a room with 1,000 other people. The only way to get out of the room is to do something better than those 1,000 other people. So what would that one thing be? Why don't we start with Heather?
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Heather Shelton. And shout out to the comments. I like all of the comments people putting at Robin House, Newport News, Virginia, 2 up, 2 down. That's where I'm from. So I had to shout that out real quick. Because when you're from VA, you got to tell each other you're from VA. I am a media coach and personality, and I have loved every minute of being a part of Peoplecast.
Awesome. Well, I'm Josh Rich, and I am the founder of Lionheart HR. So excited to be with you all today. At Lionheart HR, we really work to help move conversations about DEIB to action. So that is something that we do. And in terms of that icebreaker question, Jerrin, I'm going to tentatively say that I could sing my way out of that room. That's what I'm going with.
Oh, I know why I blanked. I blanked, didn't I? I didn't answer the question. That's why Josh was like double dutching to try to get in because why is he waiting on me? Like I told him because I was up, 2 down, and that's where my mind was. I will not sing. So I'll piggyback on Josh. If I sing, people gonna push me out the room. So he gonna sing. You know what I'm saying? We might duet, but then we both gonna go because he has a voice of an angel, apparently.
I like that. Okay. Thank you.
Singing, Haley, you're up.
I also do not have the voice of an angel, so I'm right alongside you. I'll sing my butt out because they will kick me out because I'm a terrible singer. but I'm even worse of an athlete. So you try to make me do something athletic, that's really my ticket out of the room. But since I haven't gotten to introduce myself and I got to just jump straight into our question, I'm Haley Moss. I am an attorney, I am an author, and I am an advocate for neurodiversity, autism, and disabilities. I am from Miami, Florida, so joining you. So I'm somewhere with lots of sunshine and palm trees, even though I'm pretty sure it's been raining the last couple of days. And I get to geek out about all things related to neurodiversity. I really love what I do, and I think that we can have some really great conversations together. And hopefully you don't have to hear me sing and you don't have to watch me play sports. But if I had to do something I'm actually kind of good at, I would probably actually like draw and paint or something. Just take commissions the entire way out of the room.
I love that. You'd have to like create some space in that room of 1,000 people though, to like set up an easel.
People would leave because the room would be so crowded if we set up an easel. It's genius.
Genius. Mike, what about you?
Oh my goodness. I'm right there with Haley. Definitely, anything sports oriented or dancing. If I were to dance, yeah, I would clear the room in a heartbeat. So what about you, Jerrin?
Thumb wrestling, because for whatever, maybe it's because I grew up texting instead of talking on the phone, but I feel like I have a lot of dexterity in my thumbs, and I've won many a thumb wrestling tournament. So that's what I would do.
Glad you clarified wrestling as thumb wrestling, because I had SmackDown, WWE in my head, but I'm like, okay, you can do that. Rock, paper, scissors, you're good at that too?
Yes. It just depends, because some people never get is it 1, 2, 3, like 1, 2, 3 shoot, or is it 1, 2 shoot? So
it's 1, 2, 3 shoot.
Yeah,
no. Wait a minute. Is
three.
It not rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock?
No.
If you're a Big Bang Theory fan, rock, paper, lizard, scissors, Spock. Or rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock. Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Everybody's looking at you like, what are you talking about?
Hey, look it up. All I can say is look it up. Do I have any people?
It's okay, Mike.
I don't watch the Big Bang Theory, and thumb wrestling's hard enough already because I'm left-handed. So I'm just, all of these hand sports don't go well for me for every single reason.
I get it. Jeanette Caldera there in the chat. She says, love Big Bang. Right there with you. Yep.
There we go.
So
love
she
Big
knows
Bang.
what we're saying. Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I got our listeners are backing us up. Backing me up anyway. You guys are leaving me in the dust, but that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'll deal with
It's
it.
all good, Mike.
Why you love us.
I'm not going to cry.
We love you, Mike. It's fine.
Well, we're super. Oh, yeah. Go take
we
it.
are.
You take
I know,
it.
seriously. I mean, you were going to say the same thing I was. We are really excited to have you three back on the show. We're excited to have our listeners, the audience out there. I mean, it's just going to be a phenomenal show here. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just get into it. So, Jerrin, why don't you kick us off?
Happy to, Mike. So this past season, as you all know, is about humanizing DEIB through storytelling. DEIB meaning diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We said it a bunch during this season, but just wanted to reiterate. So I think after the past year and a half, the dialogue around DEIB has expanded immensely. But to some degree, it's also gotten just a little bit played out, especially in the corporate environment. So we really started this podcast because we wanted to go deeper. And instead of approaching DEIB from a check the box perspective, we wanted to model real conversations with real industry experts in an effort to humanize this initiative. And also hopefully share some perspectives that our audience may not have heard or encountered otherwise. So just to kick off our conversation today, I wanted to ask you three, what do you think the roadblocks are to humanizing the conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? So since we started with Heather last time, why don't we go to Josh, Haley, and then Heather? So Josh, what's that one roadblock you see that prevents us from humanizing this conversation?
Thank you, Jerrin. So I think that one roadblock to humanizing this conversation about DEIB is something that I feel like I'm seeing more of, and that is a us versus them mentality that is seemingly very prevalent, at this point. And so, I would just kind of step back for a moment and say, as it relates to the us versus them mentality, when we look at it genetically, all of us are like 99% the same DNA wise in terms of our makeup. And so what that tells me is that in many ways, people are focused upon the artificial, differences in terms of that being so much bigger versus all of the similarities that we have just from a genetic standpoint, in that way. And I think that it's a missed opportunity if we look at things through that lens solely because of the fact that there's a business case for why we need to make sure that we are, in fact, taking diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging as not just a check the box exercise, but really something that we are aligning with business strategy and so forth. Case in point, there is a musical superstar that I'm sure everybody has heard of by the name of Rihanna, right? Last week, Rihanna was in the news because she recently was named a billionaire. And it wasn't solely because of her music. It was because of her business endeavors with Fenty Beauty, right? And you say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, it was a big deal because Rihanna looked at a segment of the marketplace that was not really being served fully. And she came out with a makeup line that would provide all different shades of makeup, right? And so this underserved aspect of the marketplace, they tested out the makeup and they said that not only did they love it, they appreciated her for it. And look at what it has done for her and her business. It's made them so profitable. And now she's a billionaire. There have been beauty supply companies out there for many years, but this was a missed opportunity. So Rihanna and her team came in, they looked at the marketplace and said, hey, I think that we can do this differently. And we can actually carve out a segment for ourselves. And so, she did that. And now we're seeing the proof of it in that way. And other competitors are starting to have to make that pivot to go to that segment of the marketplace. So again, I think the us versus them is a roadblock right now. But if we look at it a little differently, I think that we're going to see opportunities just like Rihanna did. And it's going to help businesses to be that much stronger.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a business case for the authenticity behind not just running a check the box DEIB initiative. Haley, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that a lot of businesses do run a check the box, especially in areas of inclusion that we're not as well versed in, or because we do know there's a business case. So when it comes to disability, inclusion, and neurodiversity, a lot of folks focus on this moral imperative of, oh, look at us, we're good people, we're hiring people with disabilities. Then they focus on that business case of, oh, look, we make more money. Oh, look, the public loves when we see these cashiers who are using wheelchairs or who have a physical disability or an intellectual disability. Like, we just feel good about it and they make more money, their shareholders are happy, et cetera, et cetera. But I think just doing things for the business case or because there's a hole in that market isn't really what it's all about either. I think with DEIB, it's really important that we humanize it however we can. And I know that's something that we've been trying to do here at Peoplecast, but the way that I see it is also treating the people who are doing this work, who are educating, who are making sure that products and services and great places to work are for everybody and that it's accessible, that those of us who are in that leadership role, that we're also seen as human beings. I know coming from disability, a lot of times we're seen as simply just inspiring stories or just to tell our personal story. And that where personal and professional mix often isn't seen as a valid intersection sometimes. So I know, especially for me, because I have a sizable following online and I do a lot of work on Instagram, for instance, and I post a lot, at least in my stories when I get around to it, is folks will just treat me as a resource and an account rather than a person. So I think it's really important that we always remember that behind everything that we consume, whether it's Rihanna's makeup, whether it's an Instagram influencer, or whether it's an article that we read online, that there are actual people behind that. There's someone whose byline is on that article, someone who was quoted for it. There's someone running an Instagram account. There's someone who's running DEIB initiatives at a company, and there's a whole team in Rihanna's case. I doubt Rihanna did it alone. So I think it's really important that we realize that there are humans and we treat humans like humans. It happens a lot more in disabilities. We get treated like young children when we're adults, or we just don't get treated like people. And it's like, please help me with my kid. Please help me with this. And it's like, whoa, 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 slow down. I am a person. I am a person who is educating as primarily at times a volunteer. Sometimes I'm doing it for work, but I am also not a therapist. As much as I would love to help you, sometimes I'm not the right person, or that I'm not the right person to even represent you in a legal case. Please don't get mad at me for it. I am a person, not an account. I am someone with interests and hobbies and things outside of this space too.
Absolutely. Hashtag not a spokesperson for sure. I feel like that's definitely something that's been part of the conversation that I've seen, even online, just about relying on your friends who may represent a certain marginalized population to be the spokesperson for that entire population. Heather, what are your thoughts on that?
Man, Haley, way to be awesome. First of all, I'm a fan, trust, straight up fan. I think a roadblock to the conversation too is fear, right? I think people sometimes don't know how to start a conversation with someone who's different from them. You know, they might have grown up a certain way, their friend group might be talking a certain way, and then you show up to work and hey, you're working with a person that's not from where you're from, right? And so I think a lot of the times people really are resistant to change, and they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to face like some of the things that they've thought about. And I think a way to get around that is to be curious about people. Just be curious in general, be a life learner. And I think asking questions, but being honest about why you're asking the question, right? Like Haley said, like, she's not a resource. Like, don't go up and just try like use her up. But if you want to be honest and really get to know people, stay curious, be a lifelong learner, and just that removes that fear barrier, I think.
I would completely agree with you on that one, Heather. Fear, and I see right here Michelle in the chat, she agrees as well. Fear is the number one thing that is, to me, you know, it's a roadblock, because I think there's sometimes we don't want to say the wrong thing, right? And the way that I have approached the journey that I'm on is I would rather take a chance to start the conversation and maybe say the wrong thing, learn from it, apologize, and move on, rather than just not say anything at all. And I think you know, fear is the biggest roadblock for me anyway. And I completely agree. And also thank you to another one of our participants, Caitlin, for clarifying that Rihanna's makeup line is Fenty. And Josh, I'm glad you shared that story. I mean, that's Rihanna's story, right? She has had a career, and she's built this. I wouldn't say empire. That's probably not the right word, but she has built this because of her efforts and what, you know, she feels. And it's a really cool story. And frankly, that's what season 1 was all about. Season 1 was all about storytelling, and how we're kind of using it as a vehicle for cultivating vulnerability, for empathy, and just making a connection. So from that standpoint, I have another question for all of our panelists here. What's the most enriching or productive conversation that you've ever had around DEIB? And what made it that way? What made it so enriching? And Haley, I think we're going to start with you, and then we'll go back around the horn again. So Haley, go ahead.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I could point to one specific conversation, but I think that in general, conversations that go really well are with people who are willing to learn and acknowledging that you're being vulnerable by learning. And this is something I know we talked about a little bit before we started today, is that when folks are open-minded, they want to learn, and realizing that their fear might be misplaced, or maybe, hey, it's okay. Chances are we all started somewhere and we didn't always get it right. I think that's a really great place to start. And I think that what's really impactful, at least for me, is sharing parts of my story without telling the entire story. So there are things that people want to know about my life no matter what, that are off limits because boundaries. And there are things that I feel very comfortable sharing because that's what I feel comfortable with. But I realized sharing a little bit of my story, that personal and professional, realizing, why am I the person to talk about this? Like, why me? Why now? I think that's a question that we have to ask ourselves a lot. Like, why are we these people in this conversation sometimes? And when we give people that answer of like, okay, it's not that it's just some young person who's just on some like social justice high horse, for instance, and they're talking to me like a person, that this is something that personally impacts them, and that I can do better for not only this person, but for other people like this person. And that's something that I know that I've learned because I've been on also the receiving end of DEIB education. And when it's coming from someone who I know is, their heart's in the right place, they genuinely care, and they don't want to make you feel bad because you might have done something wrong in the past, or maybe you didn't know something was harmful. So I think it's understanding and realizing that we all have the capability to learn and grow, and that people who have personal connections to an issue are the people we're going to empathize the most with. So I think anything that we can build connection and empathy is a great conversation for us to learn from.
I'm right there with you on those two words that you said, connection and conversation. Those two pieces are critical to a lot of what we're talking about. So conversation is it's a key part. And I'm looking here, one of our comments, Deborah came in and she said, trends in many parts of society encourage public punishment for being wrong. No wonder there's fear, right? So going back to Heather's comment. So truly, conversation is the biggest thing. So let's see, Heather, what about you? Where are you at? Tell us one of the most enriching DEIB conversations that you've ever had.
Well, like Haley, I've had a ton of conversations around the topic. So it's really hard to pinpoint one, Mike. But what I'll say is that the thing that people talk to me most about is how I show up authentically me. Like I'm on 10 most days, like I am today on the podcast. Now I temper my personality when I need to, but I authentically always show up as me. And I'm just not afraid to be me. And people ask, how do you do that? And it's like, embrace who you are, embrace your story. You are unique. There's only one you in the world. You're the only one with that fingerprint. You're the only one that can do the job the way that you do it. And so I think the way that I'm wired and who I am usually draws people to me. And then that's the thing they always want to talk about most is just how do you just show up and just, you're on the scene, right? And it's just like, I've been this way since I was 2. Real talk. I probably came out the womb just screaming. And I've just embraced that and not tried to be anyone else but who I am. And so I would say that always, like Haley said, and how we've said in the podcast, be curious, show up, start those conversations. If it's a hard conversation to have, be honest up front. Be like, hey, listen, so I didn't grow up ... Or I didn't really know people who are from this place or that place. Can you tell me X, Y, and Z? Like, you don't have to be so, super sneaky about it. Like, so tell me, You know what I'm saying? Just be real talk, be upfront, be honest. And I think you will be surprised at what you can learn from people by just staying curious.
I love that. And in our comments, Abigail says, it definitely takes effort to show up as oneself. And the thing about you, Heather, is you make it look effortless, right? But I know it takes some work. And your comment about 10, no, you're at 11. Sorry. You're usually at 11. So
I'm tempered today.
10 is one down for you today. So you might want to dial it up a little bit. But no, we thank you for those comments. Josh, what about you? Share something with us.
Sure. So, as I was just thinking about that question, I think one of the most enriching conversations that I had actually happened earlier this year. And it was another webinar I was fortunate to help co-facilitate. And as we were going through a webinar on diversity and inclusion specifically, we had a panel, much like what we are taking part in today. And one of the panelists, I had the opportunity to ask him a question from one of my friends who created what is called the DEI game. His name is Jay Harris. And so within this game that Jay has, he really helps people to have the ability to ask some serious questions, but more in a gamified, if that's a word, a gamified manner, right? And so the question that I selected during this webinar was to name one time where you were a minority in the workplace. And so I asked this question of one of the panel members, and he was a middle-aged white guy. And he looked at me and he's just like, wow, okay, I got to think about that. And then after a few more moments, he said, Josh, I think the last time that I was a minority in the workplace or felt like a minority in the workplace was 10 years ago, right? And so he said 10 years ago, and, we're listening to him, and he said, and actually that kind of makes me sad, right? Because I hadn't even thought about what the experience of other people that did not feel like they were, not having that, quote unquote, ability to not be a minority, because they're coming to work each and every day as themselves and having to deal with some barriers, in some instances that he just never really took into consideration. And so when he thought about that, he was just like, wow, I got to do some things differently. I need to make sure that I'm being conscious of the fact that there may be some other things that are going on both at work and outside of work that's impacting how people are showing up to work. And so we were able to unpack his feelings and talk through that as a panel. And I would just think that was probably one of the most enriching experiences that I had as we talked about DEIB, because one, it helped to raise awareness. Two, I think it also created a sense of empathy. And then I think the third takeaway that I believe was really clear to the audience and everyone participating is that we need to have a level of grace that we're giving to each other. We got to give that grace. If we're able to do so, then that gives people space to be able to ask some questions in an authentic way that maybe they wouldn't otherwise ask. So I think for all of those reasons, that was probably one of the most enriching conversations that I had about DEIB.
It's really cool that you were able to create that space for that panelist in front of a large audience. I feel like it's way easier. Well, sometimes it's not, but theoretically, it would be way easier to create a safe space with another individual when it's just one-on-one. And especially when we're talking about like the concept of giving people space and grace right. and safety in those moments. It's amazing that you were able to do that in such a public manner. And I think that is like safety comes from giving people grace and space to talk through all of the messaging and the biases that they've grown up their entire lives with. And, I can imagine sometimes that gets pretty exhausting. Like if you have to sit there and re-educate people over and over and over again, sometimes you have to step back and be like, that's not my gig anymore. Like I've done this too many times, and set those boundaries for yourself. But I think in that moment, like what a great model for creating that environment to have those conversations.
Yeah, just really quick, Jerrin, we've got some amazing comments. Cynthia there, grace neutralizes fear. And back to Heather's point earlier about fear being a huge roadblock. Grace is definitely the way to neutralize that. And Michelle, this comment, yes, we need a new currency of grace. Grace, be patient with our perfect imperfection, good to be aware of intent versus impact. So tons of great comments in the chat here. So thank you for participating in that, everyone. I'm sorry, Jerrin, go ahead.
No, this is great. You guys should all be up here, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of reaching the final question in this panelist portion. So final question, audience members, don't worry. You'll actually have time to ask the panelists your questions in a quick second here. But just to wrap up this panel, if there's one thing that you want listeners to take away from this season of Peoplecast, what would it be? And we're back to you, Heather.
Back to me. Thanks, Jerrin, for throwing it back. Yes. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for having us. This has been a great conversation. I think one thing I would want everyone to take away from this season would be just to stay curious about other people's story. Truly, truly curious, and that their story matters. Like your story matters. You learn from other people. So don't be afraid to ask a question, but don't be afraid to be vulnerable. I think Mike on every podcast always says something like, hey, I'm a middle-aged white guy, which middle-aged, I don't know, because the handsomeness all over this screen. I mean, he's 20. Okay. What is the skincare?
Thank you, Heather.
He didn't pay me neither. I said that with my own eyes. Okay. But he's talking about being a middle-aged white guy in this space, but he's always like asking the right questions. He's not afraid to be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know, or I want to know more. And I think that's what I want people to take away is like, hey, it's okay to not know. It's okay to even be wrong. If you were wrong before and then you change now, great. Like you don't have to worry about the past and worry about what you used to do. It's about where you start today. And so get curious about people and don't be afraid to ask questions and be vulnerable for sure. And then Mike is hands.
I appreciate that, Heather. Thank you. Thank you. I'm blushing. I'm red. Thank you.
Getting a little pink.
I know, just a little pink. That's all. I'll have to adjust my lighting.
Money maker. You should also be on camera and not just do podcasts because this is working.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
It's a cinema face. Okay.
Checks in the mail. I was once told I had a face for radio, so there you go. Thank you for that.
Oh no.
They did not know what they were talking about. Josh, do you have any commentary on Mike's face?
Nope, we're done with that. We're done with that.
Just kidding.
Answer the
I
question,
would just
please.
say, Mike, that was not an accurate comment. So thank you for what should I say, blessing us with your presence here today. So there you go. All right. But with that, as I was just thinking through in terms of just one thing that I guess we would want the listeners to take away, or I would want the listeners to take away, is to look for common ground. Okay, look for common ground with other people. We have so much more in common, or many more similarities than differences. And a lot of times society right now is telling us to focus upon those differences. Okay, but if we're focusing upon the differences, if we're looking at that, look at it through the lens of, how can I find a way to celebrate those differences, versus thinking that just because that person is different, they're less than, or I'm less than, or, and so forth. So be intentional about finding common ground with someone else, right? Because we're all a part of, one race, right? The human race. And so just in that, there's going to be some things about the human experience that we can empathize with. So let's just kind of adjust that a little bit. And I think that we can experience not just more harmony, but in some ways peace, as we're interacting with each other on a daily basis. And who knows, maybe that is literally just a spark of kindness that we need to kind of change the tide a little bit. Because right now, I think that a lot of people are feeling stressed. A lot of people are just kind of feeling like out of it, in some ways. But we have the ability, by recognizing people for who they are, to help change that. And make people to feel more welcomed, and as we talk about belonging and so forth like that. And we can't pass that buck to anybody else. We all have a responsibility. So that starts with us. And I think more specifically, that starts with us looking for that common ground. So again, if there were one thing that I would want you to take away from this season, is to be intentional about that.
Absolutely. And to kind of hit the pause button on wanting to react in the moment. And
Exactly.
Just taking that brief second before to just pause. Absolutely. Haley, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm with you. That brief second pause is always super helpful. And I think seeing everything as human is super important. I think kind of going back to everything we've said, everything is just about empathy, conversations, and connection. And I think there's so much fear that we're going to do this wrong. And the truth is, you probably will say something wrong, or you might do something wrong. It's just that we all have the opportunity to keep learning and keep doing better. And we have those resources, we have those opportunities, we have that responsibility. And I think together, we really can find what we have in common, find what we don't, and realize that we can do something great together. It's realizing, where did we have gaps, where and how do we address these gaps in our knowledge? So I think that, and also just keeping it human. Everything that we do is a conversation. And I think when we see it as everything is a conversation, it's a lot less intimidating.
Yeah. Commonality, right? I heard that loud and clear. And it goes back to that grace thing. I'm hung up on that, because if we extend grace to each other and we give that space, then those, mistakes that you make tend to be less apparent. Again, you have the opportunity to learn, move on, and move forward. So all of those comments just certainly resonate, I think, with me and with the listeners too. So thank you for that. And just want to quick shout out to Alfred in the chat here. Age is just a number. Yes, sir. Age is just a number, albeit a slightly bigger number. That's fine. I appreciate it at any rate. And I am really excited to hear more from our panelists. So Let's jump right back in.
There they are, beaming back up.
Coming back in.
Hello. Panelists, how are we feeling? Were we able to get a sip of water, reset, reground?
Yes.
Josh, you hanging in there? How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Enjoying it. Thank you.
Great. Haley?
Dylan?
Chilling.
I like that. Chilling
like a villain.
Preach.
Exactly. So with our last 10 minutes ish, few minutes. Well, no, we're doing really good on time. Fantastic.
Great.
we are going to open up the conversation to you guys, to our listeners, to those who are on the show. Want you to have an opportunity to ask your questions. And we're just going to get to as many questions as we can. How about that? Let's see here. Let me go to our magic bank of questions. Jerrin, are we going to run this just from top down?
Yeah, let's do that.
Why not? And we'll get to what we can, and we'll go from there. So, okay, panelists, here's the first question. This is good. You'll eat this one up. What can business owners do to facilitate and encourage D&I in their communities? Let's start with Heather.
What can businesses do? I think that they can start to, I know in Haley's podcast, she talked about leadership really speaking about their own experiences, about what they face and who they are. And I think that would be really cool. Leaders talking about what they go through, their own obstacles in life, and then sharing that. I think that businesses really taking the time to get to know people's stories. I'm just big on stories, guys. I'm going to always talk about your story and talking about taking the time to have a conversation, because one conversation can really change just the whole landscape, right? And so instead of just like one, broad stroke brush of every one size fits all, every color, Josh and I are Black, right? But we didn't have the same experiences growing up, quite different actually, but you wouldn't know that if you just assume just because we're both Black, like, hey, we come from the same spot. You know what I'm saying? He's from Baltimore, right? You from Baltimore?
Baltimore. That's right.
Baltimore, and I'm from VA. Like, we on the East Coast though, so we do have some similarities for sure. But we grew up differently. So I would say more conversation, more talking, with the intent of like listening and getting to know, not just for the sake of the information. Like, I think really knowing your associates or the people that work for you, and also trying to really know your customer and serve them well, I think would be good.
Can I jump in?
Yeah. So really quick, let's not go round robin. If you got something to say, you just pop in and say it, right?
Okay.
There you go.
Awesome. So, as I'm thinking about that question, if I heard it correctly, what can business owners do to start DE&I within their communities? I think it's two parts to that. I think the first part is to start internally, in my opinion, meaning speak to your employees. If you're a business owner, speak to your employees, or have your maybe a HR representative speak to, the employees, but really have a conversation. And the conversation should probably lead along the lines of, hey, do you feel like you belong? Whether you feel included here within our workplace culture? Do you feel like you are, being heard? Do you feel like you have a voice, right? And I think by asking those questions can allow that business owner, can allow those leaders within that organization to have a better understanding for, the pulse of employee sentiment, at that point. Once you start having that conversation, then you can broaden the scope a little bit and then go external to your business and say, well, how can we, make a bigger impact within the community that we're operating in, right? So if we are understanding the issues that your employees are having, and many times the employees are coming from that community, then we have the ability to make a larger impact both internally for the company as well as externally by giving your employees the ability to share their perspective, with you. And to, as Jerrin was talking about earlier, to make sure that it is a conversation that's not going to be held against them when they are sharing their perspective, because that's how they really feel. If that goes unchecked, then unfortunately those employees are going to be more likely to leave that company if their voice is not going to be heard. So I certainly think that they should start internally and then look for ways to go externally with their D&I efforts.
That's good. That's good. I was gonna literally say that, not be afraid of what you hear too.
Sure.
Like, okay, like you probably aren't gonna hear the things you really want to. Everybody probably thinks that they have checked off all the boxes and that they're doing really well and everybody's happy here, but we know that that's not the case in a lot of businesses. So it's like, taking it and then instituting the changes that need to be made. Like, don't just take the information and do nothing with it. right. But actually make some forward movement on that.
Mm-hmm. I have a question kind of on that vein of how do we make sure people are being honest with us that like if they're unhappy with the efforts that we're doing? Because of course, like if we have a culture that's very coercive in a way, people are going to say that things are great even when they're not. Right. Or because they're afraid if they speak out, they might lose their job or there might be some kind of retaliation or repercussion. So I think it's creating that culture where it's okay to say, hey, we're not doing this right. Here's what we can do better, or here's what I think we can do. So I think that kind of goes back. There was a really interesting question in the chat, like how do we kind of move away to the systems and the practices and beliefs that we have. And I think it's a really interesting way to look at it is how do we even build this culture of inclusion and belonging to begin with?
Agreed,
I think too, not having like this one time a quarter, these one time a quarter like checklists of coming in. This is a constant conversation. This is something that shouldn't just be had from like the president and then he sends out the memo and then everybody's doing the little thing. It's like manager to manager, peer to peer. It's something that people are talking about constantly and feeling like they can talk about it freely and not just like when you send out, the survey to say, do you feel included right now? Are you okay today? And it's like, yes, of course, because you just want to rush through it. You know what I mean?
And, something that's helped me is a statement that I heard years ago. And it's basically, I listen to what you say, but I study what it is that you do. Right. Yeah. And so if you're thinking about it through that lens, you're part of that leadership team and everybody is looking to see, well, you're saying it's okay for us to have this conversation, but I saw how you treated that person over there when they brought forth an issue that they were having. So that didn't make me feel like I could actually say what it is that I was truly feeling. I'm being guarded now, right? Because I don't want to potentially risk me ending up like them, meaning that I'm not going to be here because I disagreed with something that was said. So if, business owners are asking that question, they have to really work to create that environment that's going to be conducive for, as Haley was just pointing out, conducive for people to feel like they belong and can actually give voice versus just that check the box. Yes, I'm in agreement.
Just to piggyback off of that, it looks like there's a question that is exactly related to checking the box. So Tanya Carter asks, we often hear about making sure that companies are not checking the box when it comes to D&I. However, if they are just starting the journey, what do you expect during the initial steps of changing the culture?
I think talking to the employees you already have, or kind of doing that self-assessment and kind of doing that little reset, take stock of what you have. Is your organization all white? Is it all neurotypical? Is it all people who have the same background or SES? Do you have parents? Do you have veterans? Kind of just looking at and taking stock of what you have. And then wondering if there's things that are clearly missing and why they're missing. Are you only posting on certain recruitment boards? Are you doing things to make sure with the workforce recruitment programs and stuff with the federal government to bring in employees with disabilities, for instance? Or are you using those types of resources? Like how come and how and what are we doing? Why are we having certain groups self-select out? I've learned this because I was a journalist at one point and I used to love writing and I would put out calls for sources sometimes. And the people who would enter my inbox were people who felt the most comfortable telling their stories, who were often people that despite if I was looking for people with disabilities, they would always be overwhelmingly white and they would usually be women. And then, of course, people would be like, where are the queer people? Where are the people of color? Where are people who are not from the US? And I'm thinking, was there something in my call that made it that these people didn't feel welcome, even though I said, I really want to hear from you if you have XYZ experiences? Or is it that that's just who had access to the internet at that time of day? Or is it that people who had these multiple marginalizations just didn't feel like they could trust me or talk to me about these issues? I'm not really sure, but it was really important for me to take that step even when I was doing reported pieces. So I think even no matter what your background is, you can kind of take stock of what you got or what you don't and why. And then think, how can we do better? So maybe when we do recruitment in colleges and universities, we do include places that do have larger marginalized populations, that we do work at community colleges, because then we might get working parents and veterans and people from different backgrounds. I think it's really how are we looking at this to begin with, and how can we make sure that we do better going forward before bringing in external speakers and external I think a lot of the external effort, especially with bringing in speakers, et cetera, for larger companies too, because you guys probably have bigger budgets in HR and bigger budgets in DEIB. But if you don't, definitely start with your organization and examine why things are happening the way they are. Why did it shake out in a startup, for instance, that everybody is all white men, for instance? What happened there? And go from there.
I just wanted to say that, and I think that was that Tanya? Did you say Tanya, Jerrin?
Yes, Tanya Carter.
Okay, so I could tell you, my colleagues would be looking at me sideways if I didn't make this statement. So Tanya, I don't want to make it seem like we're demonizing checklists, because I'm all about checklists. Okay, I use checklists with basically all of my tasks that I'm doing work-wise. But I think it's important to also know the intention behind how you're going to utilize those checklists. So if we are, if we're using the checklist, and then we're saying, okay, well, hey, we just checked the box, we did it, but you never had any intention of implementing any of the feedback or making any pivots based off of, the feedback that you're getting from your team members there, then I think that's the issue with the checklist, not having the checklist in and of itself, because that could be a good thing because it's a guide for how we should go through this process. So I just wanted to, share that so that my team wouldn't be, Josh, why didn't you clarify? So, yeah.
And being transparent with what you find too. I think with the company and with everybody there, right? It's like you do all the checklists, you get all the information, and then you kind of hold it tight to the chest versus like letting people know, hey, okay, so this is what we found when we talked to you guys about this, and these are the action steps moving forward, and have like the people that work for you hold you accountable to it. I think it's our responsibility, if we work for a company, to hold the company to a certain standard as well, instead of just like, oh, I work for them and I do what they say. If they've asked you for your feedback, and if they've asked you to come into the process with them, then you need to take the opportunity to do so. Great. Boom.
Boom.
Like that.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, I want to go to another question here. And I keep looking at this question and I want to go to it. So how do you choose to change a behavior or keep being your true authentic self? If someone else, and I think I'm reading this right, if someone else does not like that said behavior, for example, a woman in sales is being told she is aggressive in her sales pitch, yet the woman leads the team and has the most success.
All I'm hearing with that is it sounds like sexism on the aggression in women. That's literally all I'm hearing. It's like someone has this attitude, and not that this woman is a go-getter who has the highest sales on the team. Like, maybe re-examine yourself if this is someone who is successful in the company and you're saying she's aggressive. Maybe re-examine yourself there, because maybe she's just a really take charge leader, or you're just, but if a dude was doing that same thing, maybe you wouldn't say he's aggressive. Maybe you would just say he's motivated. Check yourself.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's what Haley said right here, right now to the camera.
That was my first instinct. Please tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I love how you came in. You were like a lawyer, like straight up, like, wait a minute. I hear something happening right here. Let me get out my degree. I think too, no, I think that a lot of times women are treated differently if they're successful and then they're, deemed aggressive, versus just being really good at their job. I think that sometimes, I'm a woman, right? Showing up in the workplace. Yeah, I've had certain things, happen. I've been told if I show up with an attitude or you have an attitude, right? And it's like, no, I'm just standing my ground for, what I believe in or what I said, versus I have a counterpart that can do the same thing and nobody says anything to them. And I think sometimes, I know it's hard being a woman, and it's hard in certain areas. If you have different things, you're different in any way, but I would just take the temperature of like who you are and like those around you, right? Like if you show up the way you show up, and then someone like, that's one person saying that you're aggressive. But if everybody else is like, girl, you done got that, you get that money. Like, I'm just sorry. Like at the end of the day, it's like this dude, like he jealous. He's not a hater. Like, don't let me get my son's words out here, because I'm gonna start saying the weird children words. But I'm just saying, like, if it's one person, that's one. I wouldn't like even worry about one voice out of thousands of voices in your life. If it's coming up constantly, the same type of feedback, then I'll do some self-assessment, right? I've definitely been told, and I have been too authentic sometimes, let's just say. So I've learned to pull back where I need to. And then I've also learned when to go to 11, like on the show, like Mike said. So just looking inward, but making sure, hey, one person, sorry, I'm not changing for one person. Nah, bruh.
And, as I'm hearing it, to both of your points, I think the question is, was she being aggressive, or, was it more so being assertive? What's wrong with, someone being assertive, in the workplace? And then, if you look at it from an HR perspective as well, what policy did she actually violate by being a little forward in her sales strategy? So if there's no policies that are being violated, in that way, then I would also kind of question the intent behind someone saying change what it is that you're doing, right? So that's my thought, on that.
Who's the lawyer now, Josh?
We got HR, we got law.
I know.
I don't know about that.
You got your law degree from the School of Life.
There we go. Thank you, Haley.
Like my dad, and you're going to say you got it from LA Law, just watching TV or something. Full disclosure, my father is not a lawyer, which is why he says that. And then it's supposed to be funny. And then I'm like, okay, thanks, Dad.
Tell him it was funny because you said
yes, it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you got your law degree from Life or LA Law, if that was your thing.
It's all good. I'll take it.
I feel like I let everyone down because I really should have had the LA Law little tones that they play there, and that would have been the perfect intro. But okay, you know what? Next season.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Perfect. So this one is from Michelle Smith. So I am a new role leading DEIB for the first time in my Fortune 500 company. As a Black woman, I am often feeling intense pressure to be the savior for my community at the company. I often say I can't boil the ocean, but I also feel like I need to do more. Any advice navigating that space?
That's a heavy one, Michelle. But in terms of where to start, I mean, I think that you're dealing with that right now. You're in that role because there is an opportunity to make a change, right? And so I think in terms of getting the sentiment, one of the things that we definitely recommend is doing surveys. And I know how much people love surveys, but, doing a survey so that you can get the sentiment of the employees there within that Fortune 500. Once you look at the survey results, I think you're going to start to see some trends, some things that are really starting to stand out. And then from there, look at how you can prioritize what resources are available within your company, or maybe resources that you need to kind of hone on and further put together so that those things can be shared. And then you start having conversations in a setting like this. If that's not happening, have those open conversations and give people the opportunity to voice their opinions, their sentiments about what it is that's being done through a DEIB standpoint. And then from there, just continue to build off of it. It's kind of like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. I think that you just kind of got to take it, one step at a time, and understand that it is going to take some effort. You're not going to be able to do everything at once, but it's okay. You can do it. Okay. You can make a difference with that, but just being a little, strategic with how you go about it.
Heather, anything to add?
Congrats on the role, girl. Fortune 500, doing your thing. I would say that you wouldn't be in the role if you couldn't do it. They saw something in you. You have what it takes. So I need you to look in the mirror every day. Coaching coming out, right? I need you to look in the mirror and tell yourself, like, I'm a leader. I can do this, right? But past that, again, like just echoing off what Josh said, and after the surveys, having the conversation, letting everybody know that your experience isn't the only one, that there are others' experiences, other people's experiences, and then, kind of taking the temperature of that, getting other people's stories, sharing those things. You as a leader will be able to facilitate that and have people share stories, ask people to ask questions. Like it's your job to kind of get the conversation rolling and being open to what you find and being transparent with your employees. But at the end of the day, you got what it takes. So go do that, girl. do that.
Mm-hmm.
You all said it better than I can, but congratulations, number one, Michelle. Congratulations. And I love that you said you can't boil the ocean and you don't have to be the savior or spokesperson for a community. And something that's really cool when we do get into positions of power as marginalized folks is that we're able to bring other people with us and uplift them. So it's also knowing when to pass the mic. When do we find someone who's maybe not as high on the corporate ladder and we're like, this is someone whose story we need to highlight. And this is how we can do that, because you are not going to be the spokesperson for all Black women in the company, nor should you be. And it's important to make sure that you elevate as many humans as possible to contribute to these conversations and have that humanization that we've been talking about throughout the last hour or so. But I think it's just knowing that you have a huge potential to make a difference. You're there because you deserve to be there. Don't ever doubt that, just like Heather and Josh were saying too, and just bring folks along with you, because that's the best that we can do, is realizing when it's beyond us that we need to sometimes ask for help or punt to people who also have the same or different life experiences or experience the same forms of marginalization as us, and make sure that they're part of that conversation too.
All right. So a few more questions. This one is from Abigail. Abigail asks, in general, how can people move away from the us versus them mentality?
Heather?
I was double dutching you because you're the one that said the us versus them. So clearly that's for you.
I thought you were jumping in. That's
No, I was
okay.
pointing to you, Josh. You got to know where the hand is going. That's you.
Got it. So Abigail, I think in terms of moving away from the us versus them mentality, again, I would just go back to, what it is that we were discussing before, and that's looking for common ground with someone else that you're communicating with. And then just to, generalize, that statement a little bit more in the workplace. Again, look for ways that you can be a help to somebody else, right? Maybe they're working on a project and you have some insight on how to move forward with that. Say, hey, if you need some help, I'm available to assist you. Okay. No strings attached. I'm here to, I'm here to help, because ultimately in the work world and in the business world, when one department is doing good, that helps all of the departments. If we think of ourselves as being, segmented and not a part of the larger team, then we all will suffer as a result of that. So just look for ways to be a help to someone else and find that common ground.
I like that a lot, Josh. That is exactly right. Finding the commonality between the two, talking. I say it a lot, which is have the conversation. Everybody's story is unique, and remembering that and bringing out those unique things helps just add color to your life, add color to your story, right? Like seeking out to be, to learn and to understand people who are different from you is amazing. And being upfront and honest about why you're doing that. Again, don't, kind of be on the low, just kind of go, hey, I haven't grown up with someone. I haven't met anyone like you before. Can you tell me a little bit about your story, and then really wanting to know, and then do something with the information too, share it, talk to other people. Hey, have you met Tony over in finance? Like he has this great story, and just being like a people's champion, I think would be really awesome.
Haley, any thoughts?
Just nodding in agreement.
So Heather, you mentioned one thing. You said commonality, right? I think Josh, you were in there too. So this next question, I want to jump to. It addresses that. So I think you'll get a chance to delve a little deeper, all three of you, on that. What would you recommend doing when finding commonality is not accepted within an organization, where it is seen as offensive and degrading instead of a positive thing? That's the question.
I know, I'm trying to understand the question more. I don't know. Say the question one more time.
So the organization that this individual is with, apparently commonality is not accepted within the organization, where it is seen as offensive and degrading instead of a positive thing. I don't know that I can come up with anything to relate to that.
I think it's this understanding of what commonality is supposed to mean. I think it's being conflated with conformity. And that's why it's being seen as a negative, not that we have something that threads us together as humans, more of, oh, this is that you're all the same. I think that's what's going on in that question, is there's a misunderstanding of finding what we have in common versus we are all conforming to the same type of personality and story. But that's just my interpretation. That difference is not a bad thing. It's great that we're all different and that our brains work differently. We all have different life experiences, but there's always something that makes us that we're relatable to other people. That's a really powerful, good thing. But yes, it would kind of suck if we were all the same.
Yeah.
At least that's kind of how I interpret that question. I hope that someone will let us know if I'm completely off base.
Another hot take. I'm wondering if this question is just a nicer way of asking, but if we say one life matters, why do not all lives matter? That's kind of what I'm interpreting it as, which maybe it's not. It might be completely different, but I feel like that is obviously an argument we've been hearing quite frequently throughout the past couple of years.
Yeah, that is obviously a lot to unpack. But I think that there's a few things that we always want to keep at the forefront. One is a concept of groupthink, right? When people are individualized, you may have a conversation and we can really connect. Then when people are in a larger group, the loudest voice starts saying something, and maybe some people just kind of fall in line, with whatever that thinking is, because they feel like they can relate. Because let's face it, we all want to feel connected, right? We don't want to feel like we're off, by ourselves and just being, ostracized, for that matter. So if we can find some common ground, again, that's not a bad thing. But the difference is, are you blocking out those basic similarities that you have with someone else and not really taking into account what their challenges may be, right? Because if we don't take into account what their challenges may be, then it's very easy for us to be skewed and think that our way of seeing things is the only way to see things. And if we get to a place like that, it's going to be really difficult to truly have an inclusive environment, right? So we kind of have to go against thinking that we know all of the answers and it's just one way to look at a situation, and invite somebody else to come in and have that conversation in a way that's going to help to bring them along and, hopefully bring us along in the process. So I think that's really important.
I think just to piggyback off of that, Josh, I feel like the step one is we are all part of one race, which is the human race. And we all go through things. We all have highs and lows. They're not the same, but we can all relatively empathize or sympathize with other people. And then there's like the next step. And then you'll hear the messaging around, well, you'll never want to say to someone, oh, I completely understand what you're going through. Mm-hmm. I know obviously a lot of people can take offense to that because you don't know what they are going through 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And I think that mixed messaging makes people a little bit confused, going back to the entire fear conversation about not wanting to say the wrong thing, or just the cognitive dissonance of, I know that there's supposed to be a level of equity in the way that I think about everybody around me, and I'm supposed to find the commonalities, but I'm also not allowed to say that I understand somebody else's experience or perspective. And so I feel like that dissonance causes a lot of hesitance when approaching these conversations, especially in the corporate environment, because you have that extra layer of filter and being when you're present at work.
Hey, Heather, were you about to say something?
I was just thinking about when you go into conversations thinking that you know everything, assuming that you know everything about a person versus like seeking like to understand and then be understood. When you flip that perspective and you go in trying to learn about something versus trying to talk, I think that's where you can really have an impactful conversation, one where you learn and walk away feeling understood at the same time. So I think it's like the intent of how you going in, like, don't go in thinking that you do know, and don't be afraid to say that you thought it was one way, but it was another. I think people don't want to own up to the fact that like, oh man, I used to think that way, but I met such and such and they showed me like X, Y, and Z. And now look, because I think if we heard more stories like that, people would be open to change versus sitting around going like, oh no, this person is the same way. I've met them all. You know what I mean? Like, you just kind of just have to own it and then keep it moving.
Something else that I would just add there, and I really love that comment that you made there, Heather, in terms of seeking first to understand rather than to be understood, because we need to check our motives. Okay, when we're having these conversations, if you're sitting down at that proverbial table and you're saying right from the beginning that there's nothing that person over there on the other side of the table could say that's going to change my mind, then we've already lost that opportunity in that sense. You have to come there being open. And so in a corporate environment, Jerrin, I heard you mention about corporate. I think it's important to set some ground rules, so to speak. And I use that word loosely in terms of rules. But when we're talking about creating a safe space for these conversations, it is first, we need to assume positive intent from the other person, right? And vice versa. If we give each other that space there and we say, look, we're not going to say anything that's unprofessional, right? But we're going to have a conversation. We're going to ask some questions, right? That maybe we would not have typically asked. But now we're in a space where nobody's here trying to look to poke holes in, your rationale, or in the sense of, you're just going to be wrong. We're here to learn from each other. So please give me the opportunity to share my story and why I believe this is important to me. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that. And then let's have some follow-up questions there without an agenda. Let's just have the conversation. And that gives us the opportunity to move from point A to, even if we just go to point B in that system, in that instance, that still allows us to say we made some progress.
Yeah. This is the last question. Do you want to take it, Mike?
Yeah, I'll take it. So this is another would be a baby question, but it's a big answer to unpack. Could you please speak to the importance of teaching people to have difficult conversations?
I think no one ever wants to be wrong. Like, raise your hand if you ever want to be wrong. Says no one, right? So I think going into a conversation and already knowing that, being vulnerable from the jump, knowing that we all get it wrong. No one's perfect. No one's ever done everything the right way, said the right thing, but you have to set the table that you should be having difficult conversations. There should be a feedback loop that's going on in your role. If you don't hear, if it's always glitters and popcorn, I'm sorry, something's not. Why did I say glitters and popcorn? Yums. I love that. It took me somewhere. It took me somewhere, Jerrin. But I'm just going vulnerable. I think that is the best way to have a difficult conversation, owning up to the fact that you're not perfect and inviting people to say, hey, we're going to make mistakes, but then we learn from them. As long as you're learning from the mistakes that you make, it's all good. But if you just keep making the same mistake over and over and expecting a different outcome, that's when you have a problem in a company, in a relationship, in a friendship, right? So it's I always, especially even for myself in life, is just go in with this vulnerability saying hey, I don't know all the answers, but I want to know how you're feeling. I know I didn't do this right. Can you show me, can you tell me how I can do it better next time? And then owning up to that and then being held accountable once everybody's come together, got it all out on the table. It's well, now how do we hold each other accountable to what we discussed moving forward?
As I'm thinking about that as well, as you were speaking, Heather, I have two small children, so a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and so they love Daniel Tiger. I'm kind of putting myself out there, right? So I heard I heard one of those Daniel Tiger songs in my head as you were talking there. I won't try to sing it, but basically it says it's okay to make mistakes, try again, right? And as I listen to you speak, I think that's really what people need to know in terms of having those difficult conversations. None of us are going to be right all of the time, as you've been talking about, right? And so because we're not going to be right all of the time, again, just being nice, right? If we could say it like that, being nice, because people feel our energy. If they know that we are genuine with what it is, authentic, Heather, right? If we're being genuine and authentic, then they're going to more than likely say, you know what? I appreciate that. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Whereas if we are, coming in, we're not being helpful and we're being judgmental, I think I can, use that word there too, then that's not going to, be conducive for the types of results that any of us want, which is to really be able to get along and to be, dare I say, innovative for the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think as companies go as well, teaching people to have difficult conversations, the company is really not responsible for teaching people to have difficult conversations. The company, to your point, Josh, earlier, and to Heather, you as well, is to create that environment that it's okay to have those difficult conversations. Because if you don't, and if you start having those difficult conversations, then you get pegged as a micromanager or someone who is, your nose is in everybody's business. It to me, in my humble opinion, it's all about creating that culture and creating that safe space to be able to do that. So from a corporate perspective, if you don't have that culture within your company, it's important to build that culture, while all along teaching people that it's okay, but that underlying culture and that underlying safe space has to be there. Otherwise, it's interpreted as a completely different thing, in my opinion. Is that a mic drop, Heather?
Mic drop.
Mike. Boom. Way to finish a podcast, cool. Mike. Way to
know.
Well, here we are at the end of our season 1 finale. Just want to thank everyone for listening. Thank our panelists. I think those of you that participated, amazing participation from the group. It was just a wonderful event. Thank you all for being a part of it. And as always, thank you for listening to Peoplecast.
Bye.
Thank you.